Luna's here! Would you like to do the video? Hello friends, so today's video is not so much going to be a reaction to the Goodreads Choice Award winners, but just kind of a chit chat about things that we collectively think could make the Goodreads Choice Awards better. So I had asked over on my Instagram stories after the winners had been announced what you propose, and I also let you know one of the things that I would like to see. This is all just for fun. I don't actually expect Goodreads to listen to anything I say. These are just things that I think would be nice moving forward, and just kind of some of the same things I saw a lot of you saying over and over, and I think a lot of us agree on. So before I jump into the specifics, I want to mention a couple of the winners that have led me to feel the way I feel about what I'm going to get around to, and then also what I see the Goodreads Choice Awards as, because it kind of goes a little bit against what some people feel. So I think a lot of us would agree that the Goodreads Choice Awards by no means are a true representation of the absolute best book out there. It's a popularity contest. And I'm okay with that because we have so many different awards that are more so about the quality of a book and how impactful a book is. So we have those sorts of things where you have a panel of judges, and usually the winners of those sorts of awards are very different than something like the Goodreads Awards. And I think it's fun that we have both. And I don't know that I want Goodreads to eventually transform into these other things. I also don't know that I want Goodreads to ever turn into what you end up seeing with something like the Times Best of lists. The Times lists are always controversial, as are basically any awards, of course. But the Times one, what ends up happening, I've found, and based off of a lot of the conversations I see happening once those sorts of lists come out, when it comes to who is used for the judges and how many judges there are. So, for example, the Times Best of Fantasy, like the top 100 of all time list, was definitely very frustrating to a lot of people because it was a handful of authors. Unsurprisingly, all of those authors had books on the lists, and it was very Western-centered, which that you run into with most, of course, anyway, because publishing is dominant in Western parts of the world. But I think that usually people are like, okay, you have a handful of judges who are also authors. They have their own works up. They're going to vote for each other's works. And then a lot of times people criticize the fact that you don't get the people's voice being heard. And that's where I think Goodreads is fun, is that it is kind of the people's choice. And again, it's the popularity contest. But what I would like to have happen is for not just the most popular or the ones with the most name recognition to always win, because what I want from the Goodreads Choice Awards is recognition to go toward books that we do like, and it is kind of a little bit of a popularity contest. I'm okay with that. But that sort of help highlight books that you might not have checked out before. Some of the winners, if you haven't checked, we have A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. We all know about this book's existence already. We have for sci-fi and the new Andy Weir book. We all already know that's probably one of the most popular sci-fi authors because of their name. And then we also have Rick Riordan, really popular once again, and then Leigh Bardugo. What's especially interesting to me is something like Rule of Wolves. You have to have read the Grisha trilogy and the Six of Crows duology before you can even pick up the King of Scars and then Rule of Wolves. So you have to do so much reading before you even get there. And then with Sarah J. Maas, same kind of thing. It's a continuation series. There's a whole Court of Thorns and Roses series. There's the novella. And then there's A Court of Silver Flames. And those are not really small books. So something that I had brought up when chatting with my husband, who's also a book lover, and that so many of you brought up, is if they could do something about sequels, I think that would help. Because a lot of times the sequels to these really, really well-known authors are the ones that end up winning. And maybe they could have just a category of sequels, Or maybe it could be like fantasy sequels if you wanted to get more specific with the category so that you're tying in genre as well. Or maybe sequels aren't even allowed in the category. So if we're talking about adult fantasy, you don't have A Court of Silver Flames in there. Some of you suggested that they do some kind of almost subcategory where you have first in a series and then sequels and then standalones. And I know that we start getting into so many different things if we do that, but it just feels like the sequels with the name recognition tied always end up being the winners. I think a lot of what I'm touching on is more so specific to sci-fi and fantasy, and I think it's very different for other categories, but there are aspects to the other categories that are a little bit funny. I know a lot of people feel like the romance one, which I'm not all that familiar with, but a lot of you said this, and I know other readers that feel this way too, that we need to have a paranormal and fantasy romance section separate from romance and separate from fantasy, because I feel like it's strong enough all on their own, and I think A Court of Silver Flames kind of proves that a little bit. The other thing that I had mentioned, and a lot of you thought it was a good idea too, and I have no idea exactly how they would go about doing this, but I think that it would be really helpful if we could divide books into maybe two. I'm just throwing this out there, right? I haven't thought through exactly what would be the best way or anything like that, but if at least two different sections for popular and then lesser known, and that could be based off of the current amount of ratings that the books have when the nominations occur. And I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's say that certain ones have under 10,000, because, I mean, if there's 7,000 ratings for a certain book, and then there's 80,000 ratings for another, I mean, you could have so few, you could have 10% of the 80,000 vote for that one, and you could have all of the fans of this book vote for this one, and it's still going to be this one that wins because more people have picked it up. So it'd be kind of cool if they could do something where they break it down that way within, let's say, again, fantasy. So if they have adult fantasy and they have the ones that are under a certain amount and they have the ones that are over a certain amount. And what I like about this is, yes, it's still a popularity contest, but then the most popular are going head to head. The name recognition ones are going head to head, whereas the kind of up and comers or lesser known ones, then those are the ones that are going head to head. And I also like this because I enjoy when the Goodreads Choice Award nominees come out, which I think is far more interesting than the winners. I like seeing what's nominated and what I never picked up or maybe never even heard of. That catches my eye, and then I think, what's that book about? And then my interest is piqued. And if we do this with lesser known, I think it really highlights anticipated releases that maybe didn't get talked about, didn't get the marketing, weren't put in book boxes, because that's another thing. A lot of the books that are in book boxes are the ones that you see more so in the other categories than fantasy, but there's just some books that are never going to have a chance because they don't have the marketing and the money, and they don't have an advantage coming in. They just exist. They were just written, and maybe they're great, and maybe we would all love them a lot, but we just don't even know about them. The last main thing, a lot of you, I don't know how they could possibly get around this, but a lot of people are saying that they wish that you have to have actually read the book that you're voting for, which part of me is like, who does that? Who votes for a book they haven't read? So a lot of you brought that up and were saying that they think you need to have at least have it marked as read before you can vote. Currently, I think that the easiest workaround is if somebody already doesn't mind voting for something they haven't read, that they would just mark it as read. So maybe it's like by the time the nominees are announced, you have to have already marked it as read or something. I'm not sure the logistics behind that, but of course I'm not sure about the logistics of any of this. This is just our vague ideas that we're throwing out there and chatting about. But yeah, I think that I want people to have read the books they're voting on. Some people were saying that they think you need to have read a certain amount of the books within the nominations so that you're truly more so voting for the one you think is the best as opposed to the only one you've read. My only criticism of that is more rooted in the fact that some of us just have more time to read than others, and I don't want it to come across as this gatekeeping thing. If you loved a book, you absolutely adored it, and you see it and you're like, oh yay, I loved that book, and you want to vote for it, it's not like the winner is getting $1 million or something. It's just, you know, they can say like, I won the Goodreads Choice Award, yay. So I mean, I don't think it's too serious. The way that I think that they could remedy some of this is if they had more time between the nominations being announced and then the voting. That way, people who, when the nominations are announced, like I'm going through and reading the books from the adult and young adult fantasy categories, and there's not enough time to read through unless you've already happened to have picked up the ones that end up being on the lists. There's really no way that you're going to have enough time to read through more of the books. So I think it could help. Of course, then, though, that means that they would have to change when they do the nominations. So what I kind of like the idea of is if the nominations are announced at the end of December or the beginning of January, and then you have, maybe this is just really ridiculous, but then you have until March. So you have a quarter into the new year to check out books that you haven't picked up yet from the nominations list. And then it's truly a reflection of all of the year before, because currently there are books that come out right around the Goodreads nominees. And I know last year I think Rhythm of War was on there, and I don't even know if Rhythm of War was out yet, and that was confusing. So I just feel like there's some murkiness that goes into what the cutoff dates, because some of the cutoff dates I think were from last year. I think that it's just a little confusing. So I would like it if from January to December, the whole year can pass, then they announce the nominees, and then you have plenty of time to read, vote, and then they announce the winners. I would love to know your thoughts on this. How do you think they could be better? Do you agree with some of the things I've mentioned? Are you like, actually, I think it should be like this? I would love to hear your thoughts. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. I'll have all of my Goodreads style wrap-ups that I've been doing if you would like to hear more about the nominees in the description bar down below. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye.